To a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. To a real estate developer,
the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent.
Donald Trump telling the world in the company of a beaming Binyamin Netanyahu that the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip. Should we take at face value what he's selling as a grand development scheme and what critics denounce as a quixotic pipe dream that can only lead to ethnic cleansing of the 2 million Palestinians who live in Gaza? How does one rebuild Gaza after destruction on a biblical scale? In the aftermath of past wars, Gulf states footed much of the bill. The money went to housing, but was also diverted at times by Hamas. We'll gauge regional reactions after Tuesday night's bombshell announcement out of Washington. And where in the short term does the promise of a U.S. takeover leave the current ceasefire deal? Did Trump just torpedo his administration's own efforts? What's the next surprise out of Washington? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking just how serious is Donald Trump? Joining us from Washington, Gaza-raised Palestinian scholar Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council think tank. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Kristen Diwan is a senior resident scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute. Glad you could be with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Gil Nahaley, editor-in-chief of Causeur magazine. Good evening. And France 24, International Affairs editor Robert Parsons, just back.
It's a mouthful. You know.
Just back from the Middle East. How are you?
I'm good.
You can, by the way, always listen. That's right, listen, like, and subscribe to the France 24 debate wherever podcasts are streamed. Yeah, it's impossible to ignore when Donald Trump floats the same idea twice in the space of 2 weeks. Israelis themselves have a hard time believing it will ever happen, even if many do wish it would. Solange Mougin has more.
Gaza may be in ruins, and it is, according to UN estimates, littered with more than 50 million tons of rubble after 15 months of war. But that doesn't mean it's no longer a homeland. In response to Donald Trump's proposal of displacing them, these Palestinians resoundingly said, no, that's not happening. An echo of views of many world leaders. They say Trump's proposal of the U.S. controlling Gaza, and in the president's words, developing it into the Riviera of the Middle East, is preposterous and insulting.
We've been fighting displacement since 1948, so we refuse this because we've been fighting this for over 76 years. You can say we are approaching 100 years of conflict. We reject displacement and expulsion from our land. This is our land.
We shall not leave. My house was destroyed, but I can sleep on the rubble. We shall not leave even if they deprive us of basic necessities. We will remain steadfast on the land of our grandparents.
In Israel, the idea was met with much skepticism, even if some Israelis did say that Trump's idea is exactly what they'd want.
Trump made big statements that may sound good to Israel, but is it feasible? I don't know if it will happen. These are big things. He had to say this because he is the new president and he wanted to impress the world.
I really like what Trump said. In my wildest dreams, I hope it happens, but I doubt it. It's hard for me to believe that it will happen. But who knows? God knows. I like it. I like what he said.
A former real estate developer, Trump did not explain how he would carry out the brazen plan. But it has created much shock, and it's increased fears that such ideas could hinder ongoing peace talks.
Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, have you been able to process what we heard from the White House on Tuesday evening?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I was very surprised. I was extraordinarily shocked by how far Mr. Trump took the idea. I mean, I thought it was insane enough to propose removing the Palestinian people into Egypt and into Jordan, both of whom will not accept Palestinian displacement for economics, geopolitical, social, and security reasons. But to top it all off in a way that was clearly even surprising to Mr. Netanyahu himself, I thought was really quite shocking. Now, I have been trying to think about this rationally and dispassionately and trying to understand how in the supposed art of the deal, this may be, in fact, a negotiating tactic. and been trying to work backwards as to who are the intended parties that Mr. Trump is trying to pressure. Is it Hamas, now that we're approaching negotiations for the second phase of the hostage ceasefire and hostage deal? Is it Jordan and Egypt trying to do more on a security basis for the Gaza Strip? Is it the Gulf nations being more involved in rebuilding Gaza and transforming it? It is really difficult to fit this proposal in a rational framework, excuse me, particularly because Mr. Trump has been eyeing Saudi-Israeli normalization as the ultimate prize, if you will. He wants to complete the Abraham Accords. And so I don't believe he genuinely thinks this is really a feasible idea, though maybe he does. Who knows what's in his head? But it has been nevertheless really surprising, and it's immensely damaging to the U.S. regional standing, America's international position, the idea of the rules-based world order that the U.S. and the Western world are supposed to lead, to have the leader of the free world make such reckless statements, I thought was immensely unfortunate and deeply harmful and offensive to the very Palestinian people, many of whom want to remain on their land, want to see it transformed, want to actually see Gaza become a mini Riviera for them, not for other people, as Mr. Trump said, people of the world moving in there and taking it over.
All right, let's take a listen to Trump from Tuesday evening, his offering for Palestinians to go away and for regional states to take them in.
It would be my hope that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to return. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest, toughest places on earth.
All right, let me ask you, Christian Diwan, picking up on what Ahmed said, if we're following the sort of the art of the deal mentality here, is it about pressuring the Gulf states?
Well, that's certainly one interpretation of it. I have to say that, from Washington, listening to what he had to say, it was incredibly disturbing to see him make this sort of proposal as the president of the most powerful country in the world, standing next to the prime minister of Israel. And I have to say, as Ahmed did, we have to recognize that this is a really important normative shift in the stance of the United States, and where this president is approaching this issue. Obviously, no concern at all about UN resolutions or Geneva Conventions, any of these things. But if you want to take the perspective of from power, and Trump really is about the art of the deal, then certainly he's put a very strong and forceful position forward as his initial position. He related quite clearly that he expected these other states to be cooperative, both in receiving Palestinians as refugees, and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states is funding it. I think you got the reply from Saudi Arabia very quickly. It was very telling that Saudi Arabia put out a statement, the foreign ministry, immediately, which was like at 4 a.m., I think, Riyadh time, basically reiterating their stance in support of a two-state solution with Jerusalem as a capital, and completely refusing the idea that you could displace Palestinians in sort of way. So I think we got a very strong Saudi response to meet the Israeli response, at least in this, the American response, at least in this first round.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out, as Ahmed was saying, whether or not it's serious. And by the way, it's not the first time that Trump has talked up seafront development diplomacy. Like, for instance, back in 2018, a summit in Singapore where he offered North Korea's leader that he send in shovels and cranes in exchange for Pyongyang giving up its nuclear weapons.
As an example, they have great beaches. You see that whenever they're exploding their cannons into the ocean, right? So I said, boy, look at that. Wouldn't that make a great condo behind? And I explained, I said, instead of doing that, you could have the best hotels in the world right there. Think of it from a real estate perspective. You have South Korea, you have China, and they own the land in the middle. How bad is that, right? It's great.
Okay, so Gil Haley, that idea went nowhere. Is this idea going to go nowhere?
I just wanted to say that today the landing beaches of D-Day are wonderful touristic sites with hotels and everything. So let's hope that one day something will be possible. To paraphrase Teddy Roosevelt's saying, he has a tactic of wave your biggest stick and wait the other to make an offer. And he did that.
Who's the other in this case? Because that was the question Ahmed was asking at the beginning.
I'm getting there. So he did that with Mexico 5 or 6 years ago. He said, we had the worst commercial agreement with Mexico. I will tear it apart. And then they made some minor changes. And he said, now we have the best commercial ever signed since man is man. Colombia, the same thing. I mean, he waves with a nuclear weapon, diplomatic nuclear weapon, and then he gets, a new accommodation with Canada, with Mexico. It's the same thing. I mean, he got something, but no, with no regard to the stick that he was waving. So, who is he waving at? The stick.
By the way, as we're speaking, Gil, and I'll get your reaction to it, the White House saying that Trump, quote, has not committed to putting U.S. troops in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Okay. He was just clearing the building permit question, some say that he's thinking out of the box. The problem is that on October 7th, the box was destroyed. There's no box. No one knows what to do with Gaza. It's impossible to work with Hamas because Israel cannot trust Hamas after October 7th. There was kind of a modus vivendi before where they couldn't recognize Israel, no peace with Israel, but, I mean, you let money go in, you let people work, and, you have a small war every couple of years, but you can live. What happened in October 7th is so crazy that who can trust them? I mean, there's no alternative because the Palestinian Authority, even according to Biden, she could be one day a partner if it was thoroughly revolutionized or changed. So we know that what happened in October 7th makes going back to October 6th impossible. We don't know what is the day after of the whole thing. So he's shaking it. Maybe something will come out. I think that, for example, maybe the Egyptians will be so afraid. They say, "Oh, whoa, we have a plan. No one leaves anything. No, everyone stays where he is, and we have some ideas." Instead of the United States coming up with a plan and everyone is shooting at them and say, it's stupid. He said, this is the stick. Now you come with ideas.
All right, so Robert Parsons, that's interesting because what we've seen the last days with Canada and Mexico is to placate Donald Trump, they've made these sort of symbolic gestures. Canada naming a fentanyl czar. I don't know what much work that person is going to have.
But he's going to have a lot of fun.
Mexico sending 10,000 troops to the border as a display showing the Americans that they want to cooperate. Is there a way to placate Donald Trump if you're one of the Middle East powers?
Possibly, but I think the problem at the moment is in the Middle East, the regional powers that matter aren't particularly impressed by the stick that Donald Trump is waving. If you're Saudi Arabia, Donald Trump wants to deal with Saudi Arabia. That's why they'll be a little bit surprised that he's gone down this path over the last 24 hours. He wants an overarching deal, an extension of the Abraham Accords, which will lead to Saudi Arabia recognizing Israel. If his plans for Gaza, if he pursues his plans for Gaza, that's out of the question now. Saudi Arabia has made that absolutely clear today and has no reason to back down. That I can see at the moment to Donald Trump on that. So if that's his plan, I don't see it working. If, on the other hand, the plan is just to shake things up, I think You know, as someone wrote in the Jerusalem Post today, beating the grass to see what comes out of the grass, to see what the other players in this possible deal down the road can come up with and what they represent. That may make some sort of sense. But as things stand, you know, I don't think anybody really takes seriously what he's proposed over the last 24 hours.
I know you have to leave us early, Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, so I'm going to ask you this question now. For the time being, the one country in the region that's really trying its darndest not to react is Qatar. They're saying, well, we can't react to that right now because we're too busy preparing for phase 2 of the ceasefire implementation between Hamas and Israel in the Gaza Strip. And that shows you that there is a parallel universe where things are proceeding as normal. Who were these was this statement directed at? That is the question.
Well, again, I mean, I want to just pick up quickly on a statement that Gil made. I mean, yes, I agree that we need something radical that shifts the reality so that the people of Gaza don't want to go back to October 6th. The people of Gaza don't want to be held hostage by Hamas's nefarious intent on staying in power indefinitely, only to destroy Gaza in another suicidal war 5-10 years from now. And I actually think there are two things happening simultaneously here. The Arab and Middle Eastern world is looking for the two-state solution. That's what the Saudis are looking for, something that gives them the ability to proceed with normalization. Instead of the two-state solution, we got the real estate solution from Mr. Trump yesterday. And that is not something that is going to help the region fill the vacuum that exists right now as a result of Iran's retreat, the weakening of the so-called axis of resistance, the collapse of the Assad regime, the weakening of Hamas and Hezbollah. There's an opportunity that the Sunni moderate Arab nations were looking to seize upon, and I think this is a missed opportunity and a distraction. Now, that's in one track, and one last comment on that is that people seem to have forgotten another comment that Mr. Trump made during that press conference about the potential for approving Israeli annexation of the West Bank. And he said, we're going to be making a comment or a statement about that in the next 4 weeks. So that could be truly the end of the two-state solution, which means the end of normalization, the end of the, U.S. Sunni-led new kind of Sunni crescent that replaces the so-called Shia crescent. Then there's a parallel issue at play, which is what to do with Gaza.
And on that point, let me just interrupt you. The White House saying the U.S. in the last minute saying the White House is saying the U.S. is, quote, not going to pay for reconstruction.
So the U.S. is going to send troops, but then they're not really going to send troops. They're going to take Gaza over, but they're not really going to pay.
And the Mexicans will pay for the wall.
Precisely. So, but unfortunately, this incoherent policy is extraordinarily damaging at a time when the United States could play a significant leadership role. And actually, I agree that the United States could play a role in pushing a variety of Arab states to come up with different alternatives for Gaza's future. And I'll tell you what, for example, and I've talked to several US officials and Arab officials in Washington and beyond. For example, I don't want Gaza to be reconstructed with Hamas fully in control and being able to siphon off aid. So why not get Hamas to agree to a power sharing agreement where they have nothing to do in phases with the administration of Gaza during the reconstruction period? Why not get Hamas to agree to a 50-year ceasefire, 50-year ceasefire? And I put that forward as a proposal to someone with Israel, in which, fine, Hamas, you can't, for your own rhetorical reasons, give up your arms, but your arms, we're going to seal them up and lock them tight and not touch them for 50 years. Why not come up with an idea? And I actually have this as a proposal that I'm going to be promoting around the world, to take a lot of this rubble and kind of recycle some of it and create an artificial peninsula and put an airfield on there and a small seaport and have equipment that can recycle a lot of the destroyed rubble, so that while people are in there offshore, we can actually rebuild some of Gaza and remove some of this garbage and remove some of this rubble. So there's no shortage of possibilities to come up with that the United States can absolutely push the Arab world to engage in. And instead, again, we got the real estate solution that is a distraction that forces the Arabs to retreat. And I don't share Gil's enthusiasm or optimism, rather, that the Egyptians or the Jordanians are going to now. I mean, did you see what the Egyptians have been doing? They've been amassing armored columns in El Arish and in the Sinai Peninsula in the north. The Egyptians are putting tank fortifications and like sending in, getting ready for war. Like, this is an existential threat. The Egyptians don't care about the 1.3, 1.4 billion in US foreign aid. The Qataris and the Saudis and the Emiratis can make that gap in a heartbeat, and the Europeans can sell weapons. The Chinese and the Russians can sell weapons to Egypt. The US ceding that leadership role creates a serious vacuum and a gap that I worry about being exploited. Not to mention our standing in the world as we contributed to all these dumb munitions, these dumb bombs that have a high failure rate and a high dud rate that Mr. Trump seemed so concerned about. Those are American bombs that were in storage for 20, 30, 40 years, some from the Vietnam era. And that's why Gaza is littered with all these unexploded munitions that the Israelis use. So talking about Gaza as needing to be emptied because, Mr. Trump is so benevolently concerned about these poor Gazans having to live near the littered, bombs, it's preposterous. And so it's unfortunately, I don't see this being a positive step, though I do hope, Gil, that the Arabs finally take the initiative and say, fine, US, we will, in fact, start thinking about how to reconstruct Gaza, how to power share agreement, how to run security so that we don't go back to October 6th.
Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, I want to thank you so much for being with us here in the debate. Sorry you can't stay with us for longer. We've 24 hours ago, it's less than 2 weeks into the new Trump administration. We were speculating whether it's Elon Musk whispering into Trump's ear when he slams Musk's native South Africa. Well, there's circumstantial evidence to suggest that the president's son-in-law, who's big on the Gaza waterfront idea, may be the one whispering into the U.S. president's ear this time. The Daily Mail points to a conference where Jared Kushner spoke last year.
Right. I think that both sides are spending a fortune on military. I think neither side really wants to have, a terrorist organization enclaved right between them. In Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done? And so I think that it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there. But I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. But I don't think that Israel has stated that they don't want the people to move back there afterwards.
Now, Jared Kushner was Middle East envoy during the first Trump administration. He's staying out of politics this time, while quick to tap into his address book since leaving politics. The Financial Times reporting that in January 2021, he launched Affinity, a group that focuses on sectors such as AI and clean energy. A key early backer, Robert Parsons, has been the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, which invested $2 billion, virtually all the firm's initial outside investment. Last year, Kushner attracted more from the UAE and Qatar. So the question is, he's no longer in the public eye. He's a private citizen. But does this have to do with private deals that have to do with the Trump family? All this talk of
given the fact that he's so closely linked to the Trump family and is known to be on very friendly terms with Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, it's very difficult to separate the two things off. And there will be a lot of attention paid to what Jared Kushner is up to with these suggestions of a deal of this kind or any other kind that involves his own firm, I would have thought.
Kristen, is this Donald Trump's idea or Jared Kushner's idea?
Well, I mean, that's difficult to say. I mean, if there is a lot of similarity to the initial deal that was done, the Peace per Prosperity deal, which basically means you don't look at the political issues, you really just focus on economic development and on economic issues. So I think, obviously, for both Jared Kushner and for Donald Trump, this approach has a lot of appeal. But as we've been discussing, I mean, this is not an approach that I think put in this extreme kind of form is going to get you much sort of progress.
And the Saudis right now, are they nonplussed or are they worried?
I think they're certainly worried. All of the Gulf states and neighboring states are worried. I mean, this is the neighborhood that they live in. And if we're really, talking about a president that is considering the movement of populations that unquestionably would be very disruptive to stability, which is exactly what they need to move ahead with their own development. I mean, they're all really focusing on that right now. I mean, Saudi Arabia has an enormous task ahead to move into sort of an era that's more diversified in terms of their economy, less reliant on oil. They need to be bringing in the world to Saudi Arabia, right? Not into Gaza. They need to just have enough security around them that they can go forward with that. And I think they're going to be trying to send the message that for them to participate, they need to see some positive movement towards the Palestinian as well. Because remember, both the Emiratis that are already in talks about maybe playing a role in reconstruction and in being on the ground in Gaza, all of them require some kind of agreement by the Palestinians to be there. So this is, again, I think, as Ahmed said, taking a sizable step away from that reality and that necessity.
Gil Mihaly, in your native Israel, the people, we saw it in that little clip of that at the beginning, at the outset in that report, people who see this as an endorsement of Israel, but still question whether or not it's realistic. What have people been telling you?
First of all, very few people think anything could be done with this idea because no one, it's been said and demonstrated.
The opposition very circumspect at this point.
They don't want to go. Most people in Gaza wouldn't like to go. Maybe you can attract a few tens of thousands that already have families elsewhere or students or whatever, but you can't displace 2 million people that don't want to go, and probably they don't want to go. The Egyptians don't want to have anything to do with it for many reasons. And the most important one is the regime safety. Palestinian is a radioactive matter in the Middle East. Jordan, it's even worse. I mean, a massive immigration of Gazawi to Jordan might be the end of the Hashemite dynasty. So, of course, they have no reason to play with it. All over the Arab world, betraying the Palestinian is a very, very dangerous political game for the regimes in place. So, and Israelis already have an experience with Donald Trump. Even the right, they thought that he will let Netanyahu annex the territories 7 or 8 years ago. He didn't. They thought that he'll be more I'd say aggressive with Iran, and he's sending quite peaceful messages. He's open for negotiations. The Iranians are answering in the same. So they know the right thought that he's better than Biden, but that he's completely unpredictable.
All right, completely unpredictable. Let's look at some European reactions. The likes of France and the UK against barring Palestinians from their land.
They must be allowed home. They must be allowed to rebuild, and we should be with them in that rebuild on the way to a two-state solution.
Over in Germany, though, the chancellor's spokesperson still clinging to the hope that it's a bit of a flight of fancy on the part of Donald Trump and that the president of the United States will simply move on to some other bombshell announcement.
I would wait and see how this develops further after this first comment in the US. And only when it becomes more concrete would I comment on it. I think that at this point it's important that everyone clearly expresses the position they have.
Robert Parsons, it's radioactive. Let's wait to see if
yeah,
this is
they're
for real.
all, the bottom line here is that they're all terrified of offending Donald Trump at this stage, knowing his reputation, seeing what he's doing. We're not just talking about Gaza here. Remember, there's also Panama, there's Canada. This is
Greenland.
And Greenland. Sorry, I forgot Greenland. Yeah, or Denmark. It's extraordinary. It makes you wonder whether he's taking a leaf out of Vladimir Putin's book. Putin seems to have opened a Pandora's box here, and Donald Trump is jumping in there. Because he can do it. Why shouldn't I?
We heard, for instance, the UK Foreign Secretary say, "Yeah, well, Donald Trump is right. The Gaza needs rebuilding."
No, he did. Yes, yeah, he did. That was used to qualify what he was going to say later. The criticism came in the next clause. He said, yes, of course it's right. Gaza does need rebuilding, but you don't do it by exporting, deplacing 1.82 million Gazans throughout the Middle East, creating further diaspora. That's not the way to do it because you create all kinds of problems. There has to be, and he insisted on it again, a two-state solution to this problem. Whether or not that's realistic is another matter. But, the European major powers are all following that line at the moment, but all at the same time, trying to avert their gaze from Donald Trump in the hope that he doesn't look at them.
Kristen Diwan, if you were whispering into the ear of some of the leaders on this side of the Atlantic, what would you tell them how to handle this situation?
Oof. Well, that's a challenge. I'm not sure I could say, but definitely, I know that there are many countries that are looking for some support for practical steps moving forward on what we can do to start to rebuild Gaza or look for some situation that will bring some security both for Israelis and for Gazans. And so I think trying to deal practically with those that are looking at those steps, and we have an agreement that we're working towards phase 2 right now. You mentioned the countries before not taking the bait. I think probably they have their hands full and just wanting to focus on getting to that next step. That's probably a more productive place to put your energies right now.
But Kristen, is phase 2 dead in the water now?
Well, it hasn't been helped, that's for sure. You can just imagine trying to go through the next stage of negotiations, which take, a lot of trust building that everyone's going to take that next step. So, it's going to be harder today.
Gil Mihaly?
Well, as much as we, spend time on the Middle East, this is not the most important thing in the world. And when the French,
Palestinians,
with the British, with the French, with the Germans, they also think about the Ukraine and whether or not they're going to fight with Trump now on that, when they're going to need him in a few weeks to stand by Zelensky. There's the Taiwan, China, Australia issues. There's huge issues. They don't know how Trump is going to deal with that. He started with the most, I'd say, the most sexy problem, which is not the most important. And everyone is trying to see how he will react, how he will initiate the new American policy towards China and towards Russia, with the big issues. So everyone is very, very, very careful about how they position on this issue, and it's important to remember that it's part of his style to take all the place, to bombard the communication space In French, you say he's lighting fires. He's lighting communication fires all over the place. And you just don't know where to send the fire brigade first. And this is how he can choose the path forward. He's just saturating everyone he's going to say something. There's going to be a tweet at 3 a.m. So we're going to pass the day trying to understand why did he say that in the tweet. So this is part.
Are you saying we fell into the trap by talking about this?
No. I'm just saying that the situation is grave and the crisis is important. I'm just saying it's not the only thing, and he's been in office 15 days. We're already tired.
Exhausted, exactly.
Yeah, and he's exhausting everyone. There are things to comment all the time, and he has this privilege. No one in history had this privilege of just saying whatever he wants, and it doesn't stick. Think of Nixon. Think of Clinton. You make a mistake.
Let me ask you: does Benjamin Netanyahu know this, or does he think Christmas has come early or Hanukkah has come early?
I think Netanyahu knows who he's dealing with.
Yeah.
And Netanyahu, he's a pure power player. I mean, he's not a believer. He's a pure power player. Unlike
he's a pragmatist. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I totally agree with what Gil was just saying, particularly as regards the European Union. They're not a major player at the moment in the Middle East. They want to prioritize. The most important issue coming up for them is definitely Ukraine. They want to make sure that they don't make an enemy of Trump at this stage. They will need to put some pressure on him when it comes to Ukraine. On the question of whether or not this is going to set back the phase 2 of the ceasefire agreement, I'm not sure that it necessarily will. Trump does not want the fighting to reignite in the Gaza Strip. On the contrary, he wants the hostages to be released, Israel to pull out, and then he can start focusing on the next part of the deal, which probably, if we go down the path he's talking about at the moment, won't be the phase 3 that we envisage at the moment, something completely different. From Netanyahu's position, I don't know whether Gil will agree with me on this, in a way, he is released because the far right in Israel are already saying, what a great deal Donald Trump is coming up.
Can we have the same for the West Bank?
Perhaps we can get back into the government with Netanyahu. And perhaps it's not too bad if we accept this phase 2 and the ceasefire goes through and the hostages are released. As long as...
Netanyahu lives in 2 time frames, eternity and tomorrow morning. What's between, he doesn't care because, it changes all the time and there are opportunities and you maneuver. So as long as he is in a position to decide tomorrow morning, everything is okay. And, eternity is eternity. So this is how he functions. And I think it's in everyone's interest to make the agreement with Hamas a Netflix thriller. Everyone is always worried. Even if, hostages should be released in 4 p.m., 3 p.m., we don't know how many there will be and whether or not it will take place. I mean, it has to occupy everyone all the time. Everyone is terrified. Everyone is worried. All the papers, all the newspapers, everything. Our minds and the communication spaces are saturated all the time. And it's part of a strategy. When you don't know what to do, you just take all the place and all the attention.
Kristen Diwan, you heard Robert Parsons there saying that these negotiations for the next phase of the ceasefire, they may continue and they may even prove successful. At the heart of them, it seems to be this running theme, is another real estate developer, Steve Witkoff, who Donald Trump knows from his New York City days. What is it about real estate developers?
Yeah, it's an age for real estate developers, apparently. It's interesting you mentioned Steve Witkoff. He's somebody that has shown some mettle in dealing with Prime Minister Netanyahu previously. When he needed to get this deal that Donald Trump said that he wanted to end the war, which was a big priority. So yeah, I do think there is a lot of interest in moving forward. So yeah, let's put our focus on that and hope that we can get to that next stage.
What will be the long-term impact of that Tuesday evening announcement in Washington?
Well, I think I'm kind of leaning towards what a lot of your panelists there said, that this broader concern about what we're talking about in terms of norms of, taking over further territory, these sorts of things, and the implications that that has in the Ukraine and has as well with the dealings with China. And I know, maybe Trump is speaking off the cuff, but he is revealing real shifts that are taking place globally in the norms of how powers deal with each other. And of course, that weakening of that trust in these, especially these transatlantic relations too, has to be taken quite seriously.
Most Palestinians, it should be reminded to viewers, are already refugees in Gaza itself, the West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. There are refugee camps that house those displaced by Israel's creation and its expansion. Robert Parsons, your latest trip there just a couple of weeks ago. What's your takeaway this time?
Well, I mean, regardless of my latest trip, just picking up on something that Gil said a moment or two ago as well about Jordan. If you looked at that map that we just saw there, Jordan has 3 million Palestinian refugees at the moment, population just under 12 million. In other words, 25%, over 25% of the population of Jordan consists of Palestinians or originally Palestinian refugees. This at a time when the country's economy is in really bad shape. It's suffered enormously from the war in Syria. The last thing that it wants at the moment is to have 1.8 million, or maybe something less than that, more Palestinian refugees dumped on its territory and told, well, now these guys, because they've come from Gaza, are going to have extra nice housing so that they won't want to go back to Gaza. How are ordinary Jordanians going to react to that if it happens on their territory? They're going to go berserk.
Right. And at this point in time, then, is this just going to be a storm in a teacup, what we've heard?
No, I don't think it's going to be a storm in a teacup. It's going to. It's clearly this seems to me like it's the first round. This is Donald Trump laying down his opening gambit. It's going to go much further than this, though, I think.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for now. I want to thank you, Robert Parsons. I want to thank Gil Mihaly, Kristen Diwan for being with us from Washington. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.